begin our class. And today, uh, since I have finished analyzing Rajmohan's wife, I finished yesterday. I would, of course, upload certain study materials on the e-Shikshak, as I had told you. Now you can check that, but from today we will start with Abol Tabol, the translation made by Professor Shukanta Chaudhary. I have given the text in the group. I am sharing certain just before going into the texts or the individual poems, we will look at uh, nonsense words. What is meant by nonsense words? Because Abul Tabul actually qualifies in this category, nonsense words. So let us look at this. Now, just a moment. Okay, so introduction to nonsense words. So, nonsense words is a unique form of poetry that delights readers through absurd situations, imaginary creatures, playful language, and apparent illogicality. So, from the title itself, we can understand that this kind of poetry, it is, the aim of this kind of poetry is to entertain the readers. How to entertain the readers? By creating absurd situations, imaginary creatures, fanciful creatures, using playful language and rhymes, and there is an apparent illogicality. So there is no rhyme or reason in the verses. Although it may seem meaningless at first glance, nonsense verse often follows its own internal logic and frequently contains humor, satire, and subtle commentary on human behavior and society. So, apparently, on the surface, readers will be entertained, they will laugh, they will enjoy these verses. But if we try to go a bit deeper from the superficial level, we will be able to, understand that there is a kind of a logic there, and underneath the humor or the apparent frivolity, there is a kind of satire or a kind of a criticism, which is not very obviously strong, but it is there more or less. And there are commentaries on human behavior and society. So this genre became particularly popular in the 19th century in England through the works of writers such as Edward Lear and Lewis Carroll. Now, the name of Lewis Carroll, of course, it is familiar to you. You have Through the Looking Glass. I think SD Madam had already uh, discussed that delightful text with you. So Lewis Carroll is a familiar figure to the Indian readers with his Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, his most, famous works. Now, he also wrote certain nonsense words which may be found in Alice in Wonderland, Jabberwocky, for instance. The other poet, Edward Lear, he was also a writer of nonsense verse. In fact, he was a very, famous practitioner of this nonsense verse form. Now, their poems and stories introduced readers to fantastic worlds where ordinary rules of language and reality were joyfully overturned. So, obviously, you can find that in Through the Looking Glass. In Bengali literature, the tradition reached its highest expression in the works of Sukumar Roy, whose Abol Tabol remains a classic example of nonsense literature. So Abol Tabol, the very title, it means rhyme without uh, reason. So uh, saying something which does not have any meaning, apparent meaning. Sukumar Rai was obviously the first Bengali writer who was influenced by this genre, and he brought this genre into Bengali literature by publishing Abol Tabol and Hojo Borola. I would ask you to read Hojo Borola uh, in the Bengali original, because that is also a delightful book if you haven't read it already. So these two books we read in our uh, boyhood days. So, some of the features of nonsense verse, we can look at the creative use of language. Now, often new words are invented, unrelated ideas, they are uh, brought together, impossible characters are created, and events also are created. So there is an apparent absurdity in the whole thing. But this genre requires great artistic skill because the poet has to maintain rhythm, rhyme, and coherence while creating a world that challenges conventional logic. So, obviously, it is a very special type or genre of poetry, and it defies the conventional or sensible way of writing. So, it would upset the conventional readers. So, obviously, we can understand if we read Abul Tabul why the poems have come under this title. Nonsense verse now, it serves several purposes. It stimulates the imagination, encourages linguistic playfulness, and provides entertainment. So, a kind of a threefold function. At a deeper level, it may also satirize social customs, expose human foolishness, and question rigid patterns of thought. So, these things the poet, of course, does. That is our poet, Sukumar Rai. By breaking the rules of ordinary language and logic, nonsense verse invites readers to see the world from fresh and unexpected perspectives. So, not through the traditional lens, as it were. Thus, nonsense verse is far more than mere childish amusement. It is a sophisticated literary form that combines humor, creativity, fantasy, and intellectual play, making it enjoyable for both children and adults. So, both children and adults can enjoy nonsense verse. And though children do not find out any hidden meanings in the verses, critics or adults, they do sometimes analyze the poems and find out deeper meanings, as we find out, we can find out in these poems by Sukumar Rai. So, this is a short introduction to nonsense verse. And as I told you about, uh, you know, Edward Lear. Now, Edward Lear, he was the writer who popularized nonsense literature in his limericks, Limericks. Uh, he has this book called A Book of Nonsense, which was published in 1846. And there are certain other well-known works by Edward Lear. For example, The Owl and the Pussycat, uh, The Jumbies, Jumbies, and The Story of the Four Children Who Went Around the World. So, obviously, Um, Edward Lear had started, and Lewis Carroll followed suit with his Alice's Adventures in Wonderland in 1865 and Through the Looking Glass in 1871. So, as I told you, Carroll's poem Jabberwocky, which appears in Through the Looking Glass. So, you must have read that poem because you had the text. So, obviously, this is uh, what nonsense verse is about. Now, let us move on to a brief introduction to the poet himself, that is Sukumar Rai. So, Abol Tabol is one of the most celebrated works of Bengali children's literature. It was published in 1923, only 9 days after the writer's death. Uh, the book is a collection of nonsense verses that combine wit, imagination, satire, and linguistic creativity. And the title, it literally means nonsense or absurd talk, but beneath its playful surface lies a sharp observation of human nature and society. So you will remember that this book was written during the British rule, when the British were still the masters in our country. And obviously, Sukumar Rai presented certain situations, certain characters in his poems, which satirized or criticized in a very subtle way the people who were associated with the government service and other things. So Sukumar Rai, is associated with he is regarded rather as one of the pioneers. He is regarded as the one of the pioneers of nonsense verse in Bengali literature. And a fantastic world was created by him, which was populated by strange creatures, eccentric characters, impossible situations. So, all of us, I hope all of you have read Abol Tabol and you found out the strange creatures that have been described here. So, through humorous rhymes, invented words, and vivid illustrations drawn by the author himself, Abul Tabul delights readers of all ages. Its poems appeal to children because of their fun and fantasy, while adults can appreciate the subtle satire directed at social conventions, hypocrisy, bureaucracy, and human folly. So, as I told you, children appreciate the poems because of the sheer fun and the kind of situations that are described here. But the adults, they love the poems for obviously the entertainment matter, but also they can understand the criticism. So the language, it is remarkable for its rhythm, musicality, and inventive use of words. Sukumar Roy's mastery of rhyme and sound creates a joyful reading experience, making many of the poems memorable and easy to recite. So once you read the poems a few times, you will be able to remember and you can recite the poems. So characters such as in such poems, Khichuri, Kumro Potash, Ram Gurure Chana, yeah, these are all strange, you know, creatures. They have become iconic figures in Bengali culture and literature. So Abul Tabol, it was written and published more than 100 years ago, 1923. So obviously, 100 years, more than 100 years have passed, but it still remains immensely popular and continues to influence writers, poets, and illustrators. So the book represents the triumph of imagination over rigid logic and demonstrates how nonsense can reveal profound truths about the real world. Its enduring appeal lies in its unique blend of humor, fantasy, linguistic brilliance, and social commentary. So it is a timeless masterpiece. It is a timeless classic. So this is the kind of introduction that I had wanted to uh, give you regarding nonsense words and Sukumar Rai. Now we will move on to the poems themselves. Let us look at the poems. Now, let me tell you one thing. The poems, actually, not all the poems. This is Abol Tabol, the title page. So, the Select Nonsense of Sukumar Rai, translated by Shukanto Chaudhuri. And there is an introduction by Satyajit Ray. That is, obviously, you are all familiar with the name of Satyajit Ray, the world famous filmmaker and the creator of the detective, most famous detective Feluda. And you must have read the stories of Feluda, and of course, some of the stories of Feluda have been made into films, like Sonar Kella, Joy Baba Felunath. So you are familiar with his name. Now, I will not read the introduction as such, because here you can read it. Please do. Actually, Satyajit Ray was reminiscing about his father. So he was only 2.5 years old when his father died. And that was in the year 1925. I'm sorry, 1923, when Abol Tabol was published. So he is talking about the poems, the individual poems, some of the poems, how they appeared in Sandesh. That was a magazine, a children's magazine that still exists. And it was started by Upendra Kishore Rai Chaudhuri, Sukumar Rai's father. So I'll just pass over this introduction, but you may read it, of course. So let us move on to, there is an introduction by the translator, Professor Shukanto Chaudhuri. I'll just read this. Clever men might debate whether nonsense can be translated, but I reassure myself that at worst, the result will still be nonsense. So he's saying that it is difficult to translate nonsense verse, but he undertook to do that tough task with the thought that maybe it will turn out to be nonsense in English also. All the same, I have left out 8 poems from Rhymes Without Reason and a few short passages from a topsy-turvy tale. He has given the name Topsy-Turvy Tale to Hojo Borola. We don't have that text, of course, but only some poems from Abol Tabol. The omissions either relate to untranslatable points of Bengali idiom or else appear to lose all their fun in translation, at least in my translation. In translating Sukumar Rai's verse, I have adhered as closely as possible to the original meters and rhyme schemes. I should also point out that many of the English names exist in the original. I have introduced Brother Ned and Brother Joe in Glee Song, and another Joe in Burglar Alarm, not to mention Tom, Dick, and Harry. But Uncle Tom in Infant Joy and young Master Booth in The Gift of Tears were so christened by Sukumar himself. The illustrations, needless to say, are Sukumar's own. So the illustrations you will find, they are the original illustrations by Sukumar Rai himself. My warmest thanks to Mr. Satyajit Rai for his generous encouragement, more specifically for letting me translate his Bengali introduction to his father's works, and for helping to name the Higgle Piggle D. So this is the introduction, and then we will move on to the first poem. This is Hotch-Potch. Now, Hotch-Potch or the Bengali poem is Khichuri. So you should recall the poem. You have read this poem, I am quite sure, in the Bengali version, of course. So um, let us read the poem. Now, Hotch-Potch, of course, it means a kind of a mixture of several things. So let us read. This is the translation made by Professor Shukanta Chaudhuri. A pochard and a porcupine, defying the grammarians, combine to form a porcochard, unmindful of their variants. A stork upon a tortoise grew, exclaiming, "What a hoot! A very handsome stork horse. Now we jointly constitute." Parakeet its features lent unto the lowly lizard, in puzzle whether flies or fruit would better suit its gizzard. The very goat began to feel impatient of its state. It leapt upon a scorpion's back and grew incorporate. The tall giraffe refused to roam its ancestral savanna, but tried to don a locust's wings and glide in graceful manner. The cow was led to view itself and staggered from the shock. Its noble form had been usurped by some designing cock. And rent by schizophrenia, the well-fanned we view. The open seas, the forest trees are tearing it in two. The lion longed for antlers and was doomed to dwell in care until a stag supplied it with a truly splendid pair. So this is the first poem. As you can see the illustration, this is the Hatimi in Bengali. Uh, Bokotchop, this is Bokotchop. So the Bengali poem you will remember. So let us look at the poem. A pochard and a porcupine. So this is the pochard and a porcupine. A pochard is a duck, a diving duck, which it's a heavily built bird, an aquatic bird which swims in the rivers and looks for, its food by diving underneath the water. So, and a porcupine, that is shojaru, as you know, you can see the picture here. So defying the grammarians. So all kinds of logic. So grammarians are said to invent logic. So they uh, combined to become a strange creature which can be named porcochard. So porcupine, the first part, and pochard's last part. So unmindful of their variance. So they were not really conscious how they looked. So it was a strange combination. All the combinations here are strange. This was a combination between a bird and an animal, and an aquatic bird and a nocturnal animal. The porcupine, it sometimes comes out during the night. So this was the first combination. Now, there were other instances. A stork upon a tortoise grew. So, a stork, obviously, the long beak of the stork, it is visible, the neck of the stork, and the other parts belong to the tortoise. Exclaiming, "What a hoot!" So, it was very much delighted when the combination took effect. A very handsome stork horse. Now we jointly constitute. So, a very beautiful creature. They looked emerged. The combination when it happened, the net result was a very beautiful creature. A parakeet, its features lent unto the lowly lizard. So a parakeet, obviously the parrot and the lizard combined. In puzzle, whether flies or fruit would better suit its gizzard, meaning stomach. So parrot obviously eats fruits, while the lizard, as you know, it eats flies or insects. So after the combination, the new creature, did not really, it could not make up its mind what to eat, whether to eat flies or fruits, whether if flies would suit its stomach better or fruits. So it was in a dilemma. The lowly lizard, meaning the reptile, because uh, the reptiles walk on, they sort of wriggle, the snakes and the lizards, while the parakeet is a bird, it is so it can fly in the sky. Now the very goat began to feel impatient of its state. It leapt upon a scorpion's back and grew incorporate. So the goat, um the picture is here. Now it is a strange combination because a scorpion, obviously, it is a small creature, and the goat is a big creature compared to the scorpion. But the combination, when it took place, the size mainly, most probably, it has not been mentioned by the poet, but this was the result. So suddenly the goat combined with the scorpion and grew incorporate, meaning became one. The tall giraffe refused to roam its ancestral savanna, but tried to don a locust's wings and glide in graceful manner. So the giraffe, obviously, it is found in the continent of Africa. It's native. It's a native animal of Africa, and the savanna and the grasslands in Africa. It roams around there, but suddenly uh, a giraffe, it took on the hind parts of a locust, so a pongopal, that is, and it started to fly. So this was also a very strange occurrence. The cow was led to view itself and staggered from the shock. Its noble form had been usurped by some designing cock. So the cow and the rooster or the cock. So the head is of the cow with its horns, and the ears are of the cow, but the rest of the body is of that rooster. So the cow was really surprised and shocked when it saw its image in the mirror or in the water, perhaps. So it had a noble form, but it was now usurped, meaning taken over by force, by some designing cock, so a kind of a scheming cock. And reigned by schizophrenia, the well-fanned review. So schizophrenia is a kind of a disease, a mental disease, where there is a splitting of one's conscious self into two parts. So here, the poet, rather the translator, Sukumar Roy, did not, I think, mention this disease in the original Bengali. But in order to sort of explain things, Professor Shukanta Chaudhuri has mentioned this. So the animal is elephant and whale combination. So this is the Hatimi, elephant, the two big creatures. The elephant is the biggest animal on earth, on land, and the blue whale, as you know, is the biggest animal in the sea. It's in fact, the biggest animal on earth. So it's a mammal, as obviously not a fish. So the illustration, you can see the signature is Roy. Now, the open seas, the forest trees are tearing it into. So obviously, the elephant was used to move about in the jungle, in the forest, and the whale, it lived in the sea. So now there was a problem. The creature that came into being had a lot of difficulty in deciding where to go. So all these creatures, the lion longed for antlers and was doomed to dwell in care until a stag supplied it with a truly splendid pair. So the lion, he actually was fond of antlers of a stag, and it was very sad doomed to dwell in care because it did not have a pair of antlers. But its sadness disappeared when the stag combined with the lion, and the head of the stag was grafted onto the body of the lion. The mane is there, and it was a really splendid pair of horns or antlers. So all these creatures, as you can see, this is the Hansjaru, uh, porco-chaired. Then obviously the other Hatimi, then the other uh, kind of creatures which are there. So apparently this poem is nonsense. Of course, it is nonsensical. It does not have any meaning. How can these combinations come into effect? Uh, they are funny and they are absurd, to say the least. So obviously, in real life, this can never happen, but only in the imagination of a poet. So, these are about 8 creatures. They are fantastically conceived, and totally different animals are combined with one another. So one animal is implanted on the torso of another, onto the body of another. So it creates an absurd combination that never existed anywhere. So the idea of whimsical amalgamation. So each animal retains its characteristic feature as far as it is visible in the illustrations or the descriptions. And it is truly amazing and amusing the way Sukumar Roy has done this. So the conjunction or combination of the head of one animal with its lower part of the body has happened in several ways. So as we can see, the duck with the porcupine, the stork with the tortoise, the parakeet with the lizard, the goat and the scorpion, the giraffe and the locust, the cow with the uh, rooster or the cock, the whale and the elephant, and finally the lion and the stag. So obviously, these are now some of the creatures are happy, as we can see, like the lion and the combination of the lion and the stag. The lion was happy, though it had the head of a stag because it wanted antlers. But there are certain problems because the Hatimi or this elephant, it cannot decide where to go. So again, the stork and the tortoise, the tortoise, that is also a happy creature. The parakeet with the lizard, that is not a very happy creature because it cannot decide what to eat. So we have seen that the main attraction of this kind of poem, is the imagery. Obviously, the wonderful imagery that is there in the poem. So the pictorial appeal of the fantastic combinations of upper and lower parts of each pair of animals really entertain the readers. Their minds are also set on fancy to imagine similar combinations of other creatures in the animal kingdom. So Sukumar Roy has picked uh, 8 creatures, but other combinations could be made. So now, apart from the superficial fun, illogicality, nonsense kind of a thing, what can we understand at a deeper level from this poem, from a reading of this poem? There is also a psychological interest that is created by the poet here. So, as I was saying, that some of the creatures they look absurd, of course, but some of them are quite happy. They wanted to become prettier by combining with some of the other body parts of other animals. So as we can see, the stork is it wanted to become more handsome or more beautiful, stork wise. So what a hoot, as it exclaims. So uh, what a joyful combination like that. Now the goat's choice is obviously, the goat used to roam around, but now it has to crawl. It is a crawling. It has become a kind of crawling scorpion. Um, and the giraffe, obviously, it now has wings. Uh, it wanted to fly. It is not going to roam its ancestral savanna, the grasslands. So it has got the wings of a locust, and it is going to fly. So it has become some kind of a flying creature. And so it is not complaining. Now the cow, it is obviously, as we can see from the description here, it's staggered from the shock. It was really taken aback when it saw its own image. It's a noble form. So the cow considered herself obviously to be a noble creature. And this cock, obviously, the body and the feathers, the legs, it had 4 legs previously. It had a tail, and now it has only 2 legs, and a kind of the feathers are there. Only its head is intact. So it is not a very happy creature. So it's certainly a development that has taken place against the cow's wish. So the unpleasant shock, it has completely puzzled and dismayed the cow. And so obviously now the cock, of course, kind of imposed itself onto the cow, onto the body of the sorry, actually it combined with the head of the cow. So the magical transformation, all these happened as if by magic. It's a fantasy world, as we can see. So we do not know whether the cow will now lay eggs, or obviously it will lay eggs, but the cock, since it's a male bird, it will not lay eggs. Now, so the poem is funny and quite fantastical, and there is an allegorical interpretation also, apart from the imagery, the funny descriptions, the way each creature is portrayed, and the illustrations, of course, are very beautiful by the poet himself, Sukumar Rai. Now, underneath this, the apparent absurdity, there is a kind of an allegory. So it is to be taken as a kind of a reflection of the dissatisfaction that is found in human beings. We human beings, we often are dissatisfied with our own appearance and with our destiny, or with whatever we have. So we wish to become handsomer or more beautiful like some other person. We want to become rich like that other person, to have that person's elegance and wealth, the good looks, or anything like that, to become more scholarly, more intelligent. So, obviously, but this has resulted, in the case of these animals and birds, into uh, obviously a kind of a strange and absurd situation with the combination of incompatible creatures. So, Now, this allegory obviously reminds us of one of the very famous imageries that is found in William Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream. In that play, there is a character called Bottom who uh, was, when he was asleep, an ass's or a donkey's head was put on his shoulders, and he looked like a donkey, though he was obviously his hands and body and legs were intact. But he had this. It was done by the king of the fairies. So, in A Midsummer Night's Dream, if you read that play, you will come across this character. So, if you look at the rhyme scheme or the technical aspects of this poem, what do we see? So, two-line stanzas, 8 stanzas, 2 lines, so 8 couplets. The length of the lines is quite, you know, the lines are long with end rhymes. So the last 2 lines sums up the poem, the combinations that are described here. So in this way, we might uh, analyze this poem called Hotch-Potch. So that just as Hotch-Potch, khichuri in Bengali, it's food or food item where so many things go to make the Hotch-Potch. Um, Obviously, it's a Hotch-Potch here also in the poem. The Hotch-Potch of the combination of the uh, animals and birds and reptiles. So I think you have understood the poem and how Sukumar Rai sort of created these fantastical creatures in this poem, and what is the significance of the poem, both the surface and the underlying significance.